schedule of a commissioner to also focus on job creation, and is that even the job of a commissioner? So going back to this that we covered earlier, 12 to 15 hours is what the actual requirement is for a commissioner, and they use that the time outside of that at their discretion on what they think is actually important in the county. And Dennis Weber has said this to many people throughout the last 4 years that he's been commissioner, three and a half years actually, that he's been commissioner, and he has said many times, this is the easiest job I've ever had. And so for people who think that they're so swamped with all these important things, and they're so, going home and losing sleep at night and everything else, I mean, this has been a little vacation run for them. And I want to mention something here too, that just on a personal, individual level, you notice in anything I've said or anything I've published, I'm not talking about the individual themselves. I think on a individual level, I've had direct conversation with Dennis Weber before. In fact, a couple years ago, I approached him at a meeting he had just had. I gave him my business card, asked him to call me, wanted to talk to him. No call, nothing for months. I ran into him again at another location and again gave him my card and explained to him what I do and said I'd love to talk to him. No follow-up, no email, no phone call, nothing from him. But just in the limited conversation that I did have with him, he struck me as a nice, likable guy. And so personally, I don't have any issue with him. But as our country founders, when they established 2- and 4-year election cycles, they did it for a reason, because they knew political life corrupts people, and their understanding of what's actually important becomes very clouded. And so as an individual, Dennis could be an absolutely outstanding individual, but on a political side, he is a very lost person. Yeah, and he believes what he's doing is good for the county.
I was criticized online for attacking him personally, but watching his actions over the last 2 years, I have and things that his actions just leave me no respect for this guy whatsoever. His political career and his failure is what he's going to be known as, not as the school teacher, not as anything else. The guy that likes to play instruments. He's going to be the guy that was a terrible county commissioner, and he had every opportunity to listen to the people and change and do what the people of his area wanted.
And it goes to the very heart of politics. Like I mentioned in our last segment that had technical difficulties with politics. When you break it down, is poly, meaning many, and ticks, which is a blood-sucking parasite. And that's what you get when you have politicians with experience. They have experience at just, the sucking the blood and the life out of, the citizen.
Taxation is theft.
Taxation is so theft. It totally is. Google it.
So I asked you if I could ask you another question. I never did hear it, but it was about the mandate thing. So can you willing to answer that one for me?
There are mandates that come down from a state level to the county, and people ask, would I stand in the way of a mandate that comes from the state that is clearly contrary to the best interest of the citizens in the county? And it's a really interesting thing, and I have to look into this more, because there can be a lot of legalities that go around that question. So it's not an easy answer. However, I'm very aware of the situation that there's a county in Washington that has simply not put various mandates from the state on their agenda at the commissioners' meeting, and therefore have not voted. And there are a number of issues just like that. And if those opportunities present themselves, that'd be the first thing I'd say is, well, you know what, I'm not putting this on the agenda. We're not voting on it. And there's some things that from a state level, the state might not grant the county based on. So you look at what's the actual penalty, and in some cases they actually aren't even real. They have no negative impact on the individuals of the county if you didn't comply with a given state mandate. So there's a lot of things to consider with regard to that, but there's definitely room for commissioners to practice a little discretion on something like a state mandate.
Another question: who decides what goes on the agenda?
The commissioners do.
All three of them, they sit down.
Absolutely, they do.
So this is where, and I've heard this from people inside the county admin building, that Mike Karnofsky rules as a bully. Somebody brings up an idea and they say, hey, well, we can do this, and then Mike will pop up and be like, oh, no, we aren't going to do that, and blah blah blah. He tells them how to do it. So, do you think that you would be, if Mike were to retain his seat, do you think you would be able to stand up to him and tell him to?
I highly doubt Mike's going to retain his seat because I'm going to be sitting in it. So
well, yeah,
there's that.
yeah. What I'm saying is,
Chris, let me share something with you. You're looking across the table at a former military officer.
Oh.
And I used to run in the Army what's called the Recruit Sustainment Program, and every single month in that camp, Bill knows what I'm talking about. He's prior to here as well. And in that camp, I got roughly 90 new soldiers there every single month, and anywhere between 3 to 5 of those were juvenile delinquents that had such a checkered criminal past that they were given an option by a judge. You either go into the Army and get your life together with their help, or you go to jail, and that's where so like I said, I'd see 3 to 5 of those, and I had a staff of NCOs, 12 members in my staff, and the soldiers who were not ordered by a judge were dispersed among them and melded into each of their platoons or their areas of responsibility. I personally took responsibility for those 3 to 5 eggheads who showed up. That's what a leader does. Yeah, and I said these are kids who are going to learn with very high accountability, understand that there's consequences for poor life choices, and we're going to help them see the wisdom of doing something different and understand the error of their ways. And I'm really proud to say, Bill, if you recall, the Army used this what's called shipper's loss, and it was soldiers who came into the Army, went through basic training, completed AIT, and once they become what's called MOS qualified, they're able to be shipped overseas in a case of war or whatever. So the Army calls that from coming in to becoming MOS qualified. If a soldier does not make it, they call it a shipper's loss. You know how many of these soldiers were lost in that camp prior to me taking it over? On average, 25%. Now you'd say, well, actually, they weren't doing too bad. But my shipper's loss was at 5% within a year's time of me overtaking that camp. And so I've dealt with some real eggheads who thought that, you know what, I'm going to be nobody's going to tell me what to do and whatever. And in all fairness to Mike Karnofsky, if in fact he remained in that seat, which many of us agree that replacement needs to be made there. Oh, yeah. But if in fact he remained in that seat and he's in the same office for me, he's looking at the wrong person if he thinks a bully tactic.
You know what I got from all that, other than that you would stand up to him? That you also have people management skills, which means that you could coordinate and organize on all 3 or 4 floors of the county admin building without any problem.
Yeah.
So, things keep getting better for you there.
Chris, let me touch on something really quick, because we had I was on a show here in this local market in this past week, and I don't mind sharing with people in the listening audience who we're talking about. I'm not trying to hide anybody or protect anybody or whatever else, but it was Councilman Mike Wallen on the Longview City Council, and he had, since my appearance on the show, shared with a lot of people that Kevin Hunter doesn't have any clue how government works. Now, let me share something with you guys. When a thief breaks into a house at night, I never do that stuff. I have no idea what tools they're using, what they've done, and what they've stolen. But I can tell you that the result is completely wrong, and we're going to do something about it to fix it. We have the exact same thing taking place in government. They're like thieves in the night who are stealing absolutely everything from us. They lie, they cheat, they deceive, they commit fraud every single day, and we see the result in this county. So if you say Kevin Hunter doesn't understand government and how it works, well, let me ask you this. 35 straight years of zero growth. We got drug and alcohol problems in this county. We have high unemployment. We have homelessness all over the place. And look at the result. Is there a problem? Exactly. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to tell you this. When I walk down a sidewalk and I see a dog dropping on the sidewalk, I don't need to put my finger in it to know what it is. I don't need to smell it to know what it is. I don't need to taste it to know what it is. I know what it is by looking at it. And when you look at the poor result that we've seen in government in this county, there's no question change has to happen.
And that's exactly right.
Now, as a libertarian, I also have to ask you now your thoughts and your views on the U.S. Constitution and our state's Constitution. Are you somebody that respects both of those items and are fluent in it? If I don't ask you, I'm not doing my job.
Well, I'll tell you, every single letter of what's in the Constitution and even the booklet that I see a lot of liberty people carrying around, I carry that in my coat too. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is that I believe the U.S. Constitution reigns supreme in the land. There's a reason why that was the case. And then you look at a state level and you look at the state constitution. There are conflicts sometimes when you look at from one state to the next, and then the U.S. Constitution. So let me just take and apply that to something in the county. We all know that we've had major issues when it comes to the building department. And last year, when they hired the code enforcement officer, they did so because the city commissioners believe that the county has the right to tread on your property, come out and force you to comply with a given code, and if needed, haul you into jail, fine you, whatever they got to do to force this compliance. They believe they have the right to do that. And yet look at the U.S. Constitution and ask yourself, do they?
No.
Not at all. Not at all. And I'm not about to support anything that the county is doing and saying this is our requirement. And when it's in conflict with the U.S. Constitution, I'm going to have a problem with that every single time.
Good to hear that.
Excellent.
That's an important question to me. I want to ask everybody that. And then, of course, we have to ask you this question because we ask everybody who comes on the show. Have you ever worn a tinfoil hat?
Yes. Have you ever worn a tinfoil hat?
It's just a show thing.
I actually, this is funny, I actually made a couple of not only tinfoil hats, but tinfoil helmets for a couple of kids back in Elk River. Yeah. And I could show you picture proof of it.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
I think he's the first one, Jeremy Michael Gray.
No, my brother mentioned that he wore one, but it was something for work.
So what's the backstory behind the tinfoil hat?
Curtis knows that one.
It's
just something he always asks everybody. I figured I'd ask it this time.
A lot of people, when they hear you're a libertarian, they think that you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, and they claim that you're a tinfoil hat wearer. Because there are people out there that, and I've met some when I was a caregiver, that wear tinfoil on their head to keep the government rays from getting into their head. Now, I've also met somebody that, as when I was a caregiver, that their entire house was covered in flour, and the flour was there to keep the government rays from getting in. And so, yeah, I've dealt with that before. And I've never actually met a libertarian who, or anybody that believes in what they used to call conspiracy theories, but now we're known as the truthers.
Truthers.
So, I mean, what I just got to say to that is if I'm a truther, what does that make you? Yeah, they used to say a lot of times that we're tinfoil hat wearing nutcases.
So let me share with you something that actually kind of ties into that, because
really,
when people talk about either Big Brother out there or conspiracy theorists, people get all these weird notions in their head about what that looks like. And yet, when you think about where technology is going today, one of the benefits that I've had out of doing the show that I have and being in the areas of the country that I have is I get invites to some very interesting places. And I was in Microsoft's headquarters in Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and the technology that they shared with us that is yet to be in the market would absolutely blow your mind. So when you think about where things are at in the tech world, it's actually a very real thing that people have the capability of listening in on your conversations wherever you want, wherever they want.
And not all conspiracies are theories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a conspiracy just means more than one person decided to commit a crime.
You guys all remember that show, Enemy of the State, way back in the early 90s?
Yeah.
We have all of that. That was all, that it was a movie, I understand, but we have all of that now. I mean, we have cameras on just about every street corner in some areas.
Bigfoot's a conspiracy?
And by the way, talking about, I know that this isn't you're going for county commissioner. How do you feel about the stoplight, the school zones, the speeding tickets that they're handing out?
Well, what's interesting about that is those lights that were in those areas, the revenue actually wasn't even being collected by the state. That they were cameras that were rented or leased to this area, and the revenue actually going out of state. So it wasn't even being collected here locally.
I was driving by one of these zones the other day, and their idea is for safety on the kids on these camera programs. Mm-hmm. If that's true, why do they only have it on one street surrounding the school? Why don't they have a camera on all sides of the school to keep these kids safe? There's just one side?
But don't bring that up. Don't suggest where they put cameras.
Well, no, I'm just saying. I mean, thinking of the safety of the kids, if they were really trying to protect them, why wouldn't they put them on every street around there? Okay.
We are just out of time, so let me explain one last thing that I'll leave our listeners with. Yeah. Don't forget the quote from the movie Man of the Year: "Politicians are like diapers, need to be changed often for the exact same reason."
That is
Thanks
right.
for joining me, having me on today, guys.
Yeah, thank you. This has been Because Liberty with Curtis Hart
And Chris Bornstein.
and we've had Bill Josh and Ryan Painterman in the studio with us, and probably be right back. Go ahead and listen to the next episode right now.
Group.